early 80s, while British teenagers were the stars of the home computer era, new stars were also rising in the East. The center of the industry was about to shift again. The computer games industry that began with Atari on the west coast of America 30 years ago is now dominated by Japan. Computer games have become almost synonymous with Japan, and it's largely thanks to an extraordinary series of character-based games, all developed in the 80s by a single creative genius. Not since Walt Disney has one man had such ability to touch the hearts and minds of millions of children throughout the world. Shigeru Miyamoto.
At some point, I realized that games could actually draw out people's emotions. Since then, my own childhood memories have been reflected in my games.
Miyamoto grew up in Sonobe, a small country town near Kyoto. As a young child in his traditional family home, he turned his surroundings into a fantasy world to explore.
He was sort of in his mind a lot, and he spent a lot of time by himself, and he spent a lot of time daydreaming. And the way he played as a child was something that he retained as an adult when he started to do this work. I remember him describing a walk through a sort of wooded park near his home, and he had an imagination that was just extraordinary. He was just envisioning all the things that were going on that we couldn't see, all the pathways that would lead you somewhere. Looked up and imagined, what if it wasn't actually a piece of blue sky that he saw above him, but it was actually a secret trapdoor that would enter to a new world.
In 1980, Miyamoto brought his vision and imagination to Nintendo. Based in the ancient capital of Kyoto, the company had been manufacturing Hanafuda, traditional Japanese playing cards, for nearly 100 years. But when its president Hiroshi Yamauchi saw the success of games like Space Invaders, he turned Nintendo into a computer games company. Now in his early 20s, Miyamoto had no interest in computer games, but his father wanted him to have a respectable job.
Miyamoto was a spacey, flighty, really imaginative artist. The last place he ever expected himself to wind up would be in a big company.
I hated computers. I didn't trust intangible things like electricity.
The next twist of fate was a crisis call from America. Nintendo had established a small U.S. headquarters in Seattle. The arcade era was booming, with Atari at the forefront, and Nintendo wanted a piece of the action. Nintendo of America had ordered 2,000 units of a hit Japanese game called Radar Scope, but in America, the game was a disaster. Head office in Kyoto was asked to create a replacement game. Without a single designer available, it was decided that it was time to give their youngest recruit his big break.
Miyamoto was completely baffled and completely overwhelmed with the idea. He started to do the research. He spent time in arcades and he spent time with kids who were playing games and tried to understand what they were about. And he started to have this vision of video games being more like movies. Why couldn't they tell stories?
Miyamoto created a simple story and colorful cartoon characters for his groundbreaking new game.